some Democrats who I really respect get money from AIPAC. Can you be a Democratic politician getting money from AIPAC and other powerful lobby groups and still have credibility? Folks have called into, I'm not going to call out names, folks have called into my show and said, Clay, you know so-and-so gets money from AIPAC. Some people I really respect, black folks also in the Democratic Party. So my question, you don't get that money from AIPAC, which is another reason why I really support you. But can you, from your opinion, can you get money from a group like AIPAC and still have credibility, or do they lose all credibility, or is there some gray area?
I'm going to give you a political answer right now. First of all, when we talk about credibility, what do we mean by credibility? Like credibility for which community and what context? Number one. Number two, I'm gonna leave that up to individuals to decide on if they want to continue to give someone particular credibility. I I personally don't think we should be taking money from AIPAC, like any of us, or groups like AIPAC. AIPAC to many is like the NRA. It's like meeting with and taking money from the NRA. And AIPAC is problematic. Now, there have been times, to your point, where the Congressional Black Caucus, for example, and others have gone against AIPAC. One example is the Iran nuclear deal under President Obama. AIPAC was strongly against that, lobbying members of Congress left and right not to support it, and the House and members of the Democratic Party supported it anyway. That's one of the times where we like went against AIPAC. Recently, that has not been the case. The fact that we're inviting Benjamin Netanyahu here to address a joint session of Congress is a travesty, in my opinion, that we're doing that. And so, yeah, man, it's I try not to speak in absolutes, like all credibility but
Sure.
yeah, I think it requires scrutiny, analysis, and follow-up questions. Absolutely.
All right. Let's talk about this infrastructure bill. So I was a big supporter of the infrastructure bill. I think it's done amazing things, especially in my hometown of Philadelphia. I mean, I have friends who have said you can see the impact. You voted against the infrastructure bill because I believe that you wanted it with Build Back Better. If I have that right.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to be honest speaking to you, brother. I was disappointed you voted against it. I understand why you did, but in retrospect, because it has done some great work, including for New York, do you regret not voting for that infrastructure bill, considering the good things that it did?
So no, and to be clear, I'm not against infrastructure. I fully support the bill, and I'm happy that it passed. And that's another key point. The bill passed without my vote. And that's important for people to know because the ads are framing it as, my vote hurt New York. That's a lie.
Right,
The,
right,
the
right,
bill
right.
passed. I did not kill the bill. I wouldn't have killed the bill if they needed my vote. I would have voted on it to support it. That day in Washington, and I'm gonna go into this with you because I love you and you're thoughtful and smart, and I know your audience is smart. So day in Washington, it was a big day. We were gonna vote on the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better together and pass them both together. About midday, my conservative friends and their donors were like, bump that. We not voting on Build Back Better. We only want to vote on the infrastructure bill. And it was their
Mm,
way of sticking it to progressives, right? Because this is
mm.
unfortunately how politics works. It's so stupid. And so myself and a few of my colleagues were like, yo, this is the president's full agenda. It's the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better. That's the full agenda. Infrastructure had no affordable housing in it. It
Yep.
had no childcare. It had no climate provisions at all. It had
No
no
minimum
paid
wage.
leave, no minimum
Yeah.
wage, no reduction in drug prices, none of that. And I'm like, okay, the president wants both. Now everyone is being forced to vote on this bill. No, we're going to hold the line to hold the Senate accountable for going forward with Build Back Better after this bill passes. So votes are negotiating tools to use later when you want to get something done and get more done. And so that no vote held the line and forced the Senate to come back to the table and say, okay, we're not going to do all of Build Back Better, but we're going to do something about climate. And the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. Historic investments in climate. Medicare finally gets to negotiate drug prices, capping insulin costs at $35 a month, and capping drug costs for seniors at $2,000 per year. All that happened because of our vote and because of our advocacy going forward. Because Joe Manchin wasn't going to let none of it go forward. You know what I'm saying? And so that's the push pull. And then the last thing I'll say is, Congress has been operating a certain way for a very long time. And that certain way leaves poor people behind and Black and brown people behind. And unless something is done to shake the system, those communities will still be left behind. Even the infrastructure bill, which we both support, 91% of the benefits of that bill, jobs, money, resources, goes to white men. 91%. And so where are the people of color in that equation? Where are women, et cetera, et cetera? And so, of course, I support infrastructure, I support the bill, but if we're going to have the civil rights level change and transformation in our country, we got to do big things and be willing to take the heat for it, which me and the rest of the squad were.
Amazing breakdown. I appreciate that. Amazing context. All right, let me ask you this. So, as far as the funding to Israel, you know the iconic Tupac line: "We got money for wars, but we can't feed the poor." Right?
Yeah.
So you haven't supported that, but you have supported the funding for Ukraine, billions of dollars going to Ukraine. And I know. Obviously, Vladimir Putin is horrible, and it's different. Ukraine and Israel are different. But what do you say to my audience who says, "Yo"? And I know the domestic budget, foreign budget are different. I get that, but just make it plain for the audience. Not supporting Israel, but still supporting what appears to be endless funding to Ukraine. Explain the difference between that when we still need so much funding here
Yeah,
in our areas.
100%. So the domestic and foreign budgets are not that different. There is a
Okay.
overlap there. And thank you for using the word endless. So I do not support endless funding of Ukraine. We've supported the funding in this moment because of Putin's aggression and who Putin is and what he represents. Some have referred to him as modern day Hitler. Some have referred to him as modern day Mussolini. He is definitely a dictatorial tyrant that will not stop at Ukraine, and he will go further and bring us in closer into World War III if we're not there right now. And so Putin has to be stopped. And because of that, that's why we have continuously supported Ukraine. Ukraine is actually defending itself. Israel is a wealthy nation, a nuclear power, actually doesn't need our 3.8 billion and is committing what the ICJ has called a plausible genocide. And so that's offensive versus Ukraine, which is actually defensive, right? And so we cannot support Israel under the circumstances, and that's why we support the Ukraine. But to your point, and to the audience's point, absolutely right. If we got billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions for war and killing babies, we gotta have that for affordable housing and childcare and all of these stuff that we need, and we don't. And we don't even. What I've been frustrated about a lot of things in Congress. You mentioned minimum wage before. We couldn't even raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour. That was crazy.
Good God.
But the biggest frustration might be, well, the biggest is the lobbies and big money. And when AIPAC wants us to write something and pass a bill, it happens like that. It's unbelievable to experience. But the other big frustration that I want to mention is corporations and the wealthy do not contribute enough to our economy. They don't pay a high enough tax rate, a progressive tax rate. Warren Buffett's secretary pays a higher tax rate than he does. And so because of that, we don't have the additional revenue to provide for the basic needs of the American people. So war budget, yes, move some of that money here, but also in terms of domestic policy, we allow the wealthy and corporations to keep their wealth. We give them trillions in tax breaks. Like my opponent supports trillions in tax breaks, the Trump tax breaks, which is crazy. And we allow them to buy their own stock back, to prop up the value of their company versus giving it to the American people who are taxpaying and want to keep Social Security solvent, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, man, I hear them, but it's both. It's like stop giving money to kill babies in war, and let's fix our domestic policy when it comes to the tax code.
I want to talk about your record because you have done some really great things with around gun violence, youth heal, mental health programs. But before we get to that, I do want to say this really quick because I want to make sure the audience gets what I'm saying. Uh, this is the reason we got to vote, y'all. Because I tell people this, and I know I'm going back to what I said at the top, but I bring your name up a lot on these airwaves, Rep Bowman. I bring up you. I bring up Maxwell Frost. I bring up Ayanna Presley, folks who are doing really great work. And in order to have change in Congress, you got to vote in more people who have your best interests at heart, who are not moderates. And sometimes, Rep Bowman, I I feel like I'm in a bubble. I feel like maybe folks want a moderate because I was going passionate. I was going hard for Maya Wiley and Mayor Eric Adams wins. I was a Julian Castro supporter, and I think Joe Biden has been done amazing work.
Yeah.
But this brother couldn't even make it to the primaries. So I tell people if you're frustrated by government, that means you got to show up even more. I mean, I look at the voter turnout rate in Mississippi. My man Gary Chambers in Louisiana. I mean, can you speak to it's not that we're having this conversation to say we can't fix government. We can, but you got to show up. We have to keep Rep Bowman in Congress.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And and we've done it before. When Barack Obama was running, he was so exceptional. People came out in record numbers all over the country
Record.
and here in New York. But a brother shared some data with me yesterday and just talked about the overall decrease in voter participation in a particular area, particular district since Obama was no longer on the ballot, right? And so part of it is we don't have exceptional candidates that much, right? That often. I think I'm pretty good, and I think to
You
some
good?
degrees I'm exceptional. So our hope is, particularly in this race, people come out in big numbers. The other thing is, and I'm gonna, uh, give some of the listeners a little excuse, if you will. People are tired, man. Like people are exhausted, literally. Like they go to work, they go to school, they come home, they take care of their kids, they're trying to figure life out. They watching their favorite shows, just trying to decompress. And then the politics thing, especially when you try to follow it, it's so phony and fraudulent. And then now, last 8 years has been Trump, 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 Trump. You
Lord have
you
mercy.
turn away from it, right? You turn away, and so we got to do a better job. We, meaning elected official, of engaging all communities in our district to make sure they're a part of it. And then for the other listeners, the other people in the audience, you got to push through because your vote is your voice and your voice is your power. And then after you vote the person in, you then have to engage them to hold them accountable. One of the reasons why certain communities have so much power and influence is because they are 10 toes down,
That's right.
deeply rooted in our democracy, from the primaries to the
Yes.
fundraising to the lobbying to the
The dog catcher.
to the accountable, from dog catcher to president, everything in between, 10 toes down. And so we got to be, even if we don't even have to be in like that. If we go from where we are now, which is often between 0 and 20% for many people, to about 40, 50, 60, it changes. There are 40,000 Black and Latino men in my district who have never voted. 40,000. So not only do they have the power to choose a member of Congress, they have the power to choose the mayor in their cities. They have the power to choose the county executive. These are people, Clay, and you know this, these are people with billions of dollars in their budget to do so many things for our communities if we held them accountable. And that's the last thing I want to say. This is about accountability. We have met people in elected office who have never been held accountable. And all they're doing is collecting your taxpayer money and doing whatever the hell they want to do with it because we're not holding them accountable. That's why Yonkers YMCA is dilapidated, and the YWCA and Mount Vernon Boys and Girls Club, because no one has held the people accountable who's supposed to be investing in these areas. And so we gotta push through. You gotta know when the primary is, who's running, where your polling sites is, do a little bit of research, a little bit, it don't even gotta be that much. You got social media, follow their social media, and then go out there and exercise your right. And when you do it, you feel empowered after your vote. You do. And you're building that democratic muscle that you need to make our democracy better and change the things that are happening.
And listen, on the other side, when they don't get what they want, they throw them out. Liz Cheney, they threw her behind out.
That's
I
right.
mean, they don't play. I mean, the voter turnout numbers in some of these other areas. You're right. It's about the power. All right. Before you go, I do want to talk a bit about your record because you have done some really great stuff around mental health, around gun violence. Tell folks the work you've done in your district.
So my district is a lot like America. Incredible wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, abject poverty, and then the majority are just working class trying to survive. And in our district, those who are working class trying to survive are concentrated in some very specific areas. Yonkers, Mount Vernon, the Bronx, and parts of New Rochelle. And so we pay a lot of attention in those areas because we want to give people there the resources they need to, they say, lift yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, we got to help people get boots and we got to give them the resources to do what they need to do. Couple quick examples. There's a YWCA in Yonkers. They do incredible work there. Shout out to Charlie Knight, who's the ED CEO of that YWCA. But the building, you can tell, hasn't received much money in many years. And so we worked with them on a federal grant to bring in almost $800,000 to build a state-of-the-art technology lab and to support their workforce development initiatives. And ideally, what this will do will take women who are formerly homeless and others in the community into the program to develop themselves in a particular workforce area so that they could get better jobs, earn more money, earn health insurance, and even learn entrepreneurship opportunities that may take them into building wealth. That's one program. I want to give you another. You mentioned Youth Heal. The Westchester Youth Shelter does incredible work. They are an alternative to incarceration program. Many young people do stupid things, get arrested, but many of them most of them don't need to be locked up in a cage. They need an alternative program. So the youth shelter provides this. But what was missing was the mental health and substance abuse supports that many of the kids who have been arrested and need to do a little bit of time need it, because when you start to talk to them, you realize like, wow, you come from some challenging circumstances. You need additional supports. And so we partnered them with the CARE program in Harlem, got them 1.6 million, and now they're able to provide mental health and substance abuse supports to the kids who are going through their program, with the hopes that when they come out the program, they will be whole as people and able to contribute to society. One last thing I want to share. Gun violence is always a major problem in our communities, but it was really bad during COVID. I mean, it felt like every other week someone was being shot and killed in my district. Kid in New Rochelle, kid in the Bronx, kid in Rye, girl in Mount Vernon, not shot but stabbed and killed. And so what we did, because Republicans don't want to do anything on gun violence in Washington, we asked the president to take executive action on gun violence by banning ghost guns. And the president did that. Like, we wrote him a letter,
Yes,
and
he
he
did.
actually did it.
He didn't
And
wait for Congress. He
he
did
didn't wait
that.
for Congress. And Brother Clay, that's when I started to realize the power of the pen and the power of the pen of my congressional pen. Because I was like, damn, when you write a letter, that holds people accountable to responding to that letter, even the president. And it also gives the president the support he needs to take an executive action like that if he knows that there are members of Congress who are pushing him to do that. And so we wrote a letter to him to ban ghost guns. He banned ghost guns. We wrote a letter to him to create a renter's bill of rights and to stabilize rent. He did that. Like, he
Yes.
stabilized rent for certain federally backed mortgages and created a renter's bill of rights. And so we've done like 40 other things on the ground and nationally that, again, moves the needle forward in terms of having a democracy that works for everyone. Because if we don't help those who are really struggling, our democracy will never work for everyone. And that's ultimately our mission.
Tomorrow, June 15th, early voting starts. Goes till June 23rd. Y'all got to vote. If you know people in Rep. Bowman's district, anywhere in New York, you say, yo, make sure you vote. This is the primaries. It is everything, everything. And Election Day is June 25th.